We make thousands of choices every single day. What to eat, when to sleep, what to buy. Have you ever wondered if those decisions are actually yours? This is called the nudge theory, and it's a hidden world of subtle psychological tricks that are steering you towards a predetermined outcome. And they're being used in way more spots than you might think. For example, grocery shopping. Have you ever wondered why certain foods are placed at eye level? Or online shopping, why they use that most popular or most purchased tag on their products? Even when you're out at a restaurant and the tipping option comes up, how it's really difficult to get to something other than a 15% minimum tip. These are all considered nudges. Now, formally speaking, a nudge is a subtle change in how choices are presented that predictably alters human behavior without restricting or significantly changing economic incentives. In normal terms, they're basically choices that are given to you in such a way that steer you towards an outcome. But the dark magic is in how our brains decide which one to pick and how it processes this information. But they're not 100% perfect. It's a nudge, not a push. But if you're being nudged 100 plus times in a given setting, it can start to feel like a pretty significant push. There was this economist named Richard Thaler and a legal scholar named Cass Sunstein who are credited with popularizing the term nudge back in 2008 when they dropped a book called Nudge: Improving Decisions About Health, Wealth, and Happiness. But the concept goes way back to the 70s. Psychologist Daniel Kahneman and Amos Tversky basically figured out that humans don't make rational decisions. For example, we fear losses way more than we value the exact same value worth of gains. We rely heavily on the first piece of information that we're provided, and we really prefer status quo over change. Fundamentally, these are flaws, and flaws can be exploited with the right setting. Here's an example of what I'm talking about. When you go to the DMV and you get a new license or you got to get your license renewed, you have the option to choose whether or not you want to be an organ donor. You just have to check a little box on the forms, just say that you want to do it, and this is called opting in. But in some places, you're actually automatically opted in unless you check a box that says, I don't want to be opted in, which is called opting out. But countries with the opt-out option have a 90+% organ donor rate. Countries with the opt-in, only 15%. The presentation of the choices completely changes the outcome. Another insanely interesting example is IKEA. We studied about this for like an entire semester back in college, so it gets legitimately insane. First up, they set their store up like a maze, and that's on purpose. The only obvious way to progress through it puts you in front of pretty much everything they have to offer. And once they make you look at everything you have to offer, more exposure becomes more likelihood to purchase, and then you're much more likely to make an impulse purchase. I think something in the area of 60% more impulse purchases. Even though they do set it up like a maze, there are actually shortcuts, except most people don't even know about them because they're hidden in plain sight. The way that IKEA sets this up is that they set these shortcut doors up to be designed in a way that look like employee-only doors. They're metallic with certain structures of windows, and they just look like official doors. So people don't really give it a second look, and they just assume it's a place they're not supposed to be. But in reality, if you read the signage, it's actually a way to cut through all of the winding mazes that they set up. Another thing, they stage all of their big products in a scene, in a home. Another thing they'll do is they'll grab a ton of the same product and just throw it into what looks like a bin or like a crate, because customers are attributing that kind of a presentation to cheaper bargain layouts, and so they're much more likely to purchase 1, 2, maybe even 3 of that product. And this is literally just the surface. I mean, it goes way deeper than just the way that something is laid out. But how did it get to this point? I mean, how did companies and governments actually learn to use this so effectively? It wasn't really started with malicious intent. There was just like this collective observation that traditional approaches to changing behaviors fail all the time. Those education campaigns about eating healthy and eating the right foods failed. Warning labels aren't stopping people from smoking, and information alone just doesn't change behavior. So researchers were trying to find a different way to make it happen. And their grand conclusion was, what if we made the right choices easier? It seems dumb and obvious, but they have a point. I mean, if we have biases that cause us to choose things one way, can't we set things up so that we're using those same biases to choose a different way? So they tried it out. In 2011, the UK government created this group called the Behavioral Insights Team. It's called the Nudge Unit for short. It's also less intimidating. But their only job was to use human psychology to basically make the government work better. And one of their first big accomplishments was the tiniest little change on a tax reminder envelope. I'm from the US, so I don't get these letters, but they basically get a little note that says your taxes are overdue and you need to pay for them. And all they did was tweak the wording a little bit and saw tremendous results. What they did was they added a sentence at the very end that said, 9 out of 10 people in the UK pay their taxes on time. You are currently in the minority of people who have not paid us yet. That's it. That's the change. Tax payments shot up like crazy. Millions in extra cash flowing into government coffers because one guilt-tripping sentence. From there, it spread like wildfire. A World Bank report from 2019 says that at least 10 other countries jumped on the UK's bandwagon and made their own little nudge unit. At this point in time, over 150 countries have their own behavioral nudge unit type thing. Here's the thing though, like I said earlier, not all nudges are created equal. Some have a bit more sting to them than others. On the lightweight side, there's examples that you probably wouldn't even consider nudge tactics. It's things like putting certain foods at eye level in the cafeteria or a grocery store, or painting a staircase with a mural to incentivize people to take the stairs instead of an elevator. These are barely suggestions, but they are absolutely intentional. But once we get into the moderate category of nudges, they're a bit more than politely suggestive. They reframe your choices, but they're still not restricting your options. Like when your company automatically enrolls you in the retirement plan thing. Unless you decide to opt out, you have the same choice technically, but they're banking on you being too busy or too lazy to bother and just go with it. So if you wanted to change it, it would be a little bit more of a hassle to do so. The tax letters from earlier would fall into this category as well. They're basically making you feel shame, socially outcasted if you haven't paid. It plays on our desperate need as humans to fit in with the crowd. And then we get to the real heavy hitters. These are full systemic changes that create really strong cognitive biases. Like IKEA, making their stores a maze-like layout so that you spend longer and have a higher likelihood of purchasing something. It's also like Apple Watches buzzing every hour saying you should probably stand up. One study from 2020 showed that those little notifications from the Apple Watch actually increased standing by 44%. There's even the social credit system in China. Points are given to businesses and citizens who behave well and follow the law. These aren't just reminders or suggestions like the earlier examples. They're rewiring your behavior entirely. It's really interesting because these aren't the only corporations that are taking it to an entirely new level. It's now really common for people to encounter dozens of stacked nudges that lead them to making certain choices. It's in the website loading times, the wording of that newsletter pop-up, the social proof that everyone's flaunting. All of these are nudges. What's crazy is that, for the most part, they can actually track exactly how effective these nudges are and how much money it's making them. They'll A/B test different messages with different groups to see who bites on what. They have heat maps to see where you're moving your mouse, how long you're staying on a page, even what you're clicking on and how long it takes you to do it. Governments have established that about $500 million worth of saved money per year is directly attributed to these little psychological tricks. To be fair, like I said earlier, not everyone is falling for these nudges at the same rate. And scientists actually coined a term called nudgeability that describes how easily one person can be pointed to a certain direction. For example, in 2022, a study found that people who procrastinate are a lot more likely to be nudged than people who don't. Regardless, it's pretty crazy how blurry the line between nudging and just flat out manipulation is getting. Generally speaking, most people don't even know it's happening at all, and that's why it works so well. But once you learn about it, it really makes you think and reconsider all the choices that you're making in a day. Like this video. Did the thumbnail or title nudge you to click and watch all the way through? Maybe, maybe not. Either way, thanks for sticking around. I'll see you next time.